The hum of the space station echoed through the hallways as Captain Raza stared at the control panel, sweat dripping from his brow. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the dials on the cloaking device, the last line of defense against the alien fleet that was bearing down on them. Earth's fate hung in the balance. Every second counted. Status report. Raza barked into his comms. His voice was calm, but inside, he could feel the tension rising. The aliens had already breached the outer perimeter. They were here, and they were unstoppable. The humans had little chance. The only hope left was to buy time for the last of Earth's forces to arrive. But even that was a long shot. Bonner, his second-in-command and closest friend, approached with a grim expression. Cloaking devices are still functional, but barely. If they detect us, we're dead in the water. Then we make sure they don't detect us, Raza replied, turning to face the massive viewport where the dark void of space stretched endlessly beyond. He could see the shadows of the alien ships closing in, their sleek, ominous forms like predators hunting in the void. The aliens were far more advanced than humanity could ever hope to be, biomechanical machines controlled by a powerful ancient eye. Suddenly, the station shuddered, a violent jolt that sent Raza stumbling forward. The walls groaned as if they were being crushed by an invisible force. The alien ships had found them. Brace for impact, Raza shouted, pushing a button that activated the emergency shields. They flickered to life just as a massive explosion rattled the station's outer hull, sending a shockwave through the corridors. Bonner grabbed Raza, pulling him into cover as debris rained down. "We don't have much time," Bonner muttered, his face dark with worry. "If we don't fire off the orbital strike now, the AI will take control of everything. We can't let that happen." Raza nodded, his heart pounding. "Prepare the coordinates. I'll give them one shot, and it better count." With that, the two soldiers scrambled to the central control panel. Raza's fingers danced across the console, typing in the final sequence to fire the orbital strike toward the alien mothership hovering just beyond the station. But as he hit the final key, the alarms blared once again. "They've breached the inner walls," Bonner yelled over the roar of alarms. "We're not alone anymore." Raza turned to look at the swarm of AI-controlled drones now flooding the station's corridors. They were everywhere, metallic, agile, and relentless. The humans had no chance in a direct confrontation, but they were about to try anyway. "Get to the escape pods," Raza commanded, his voice firm. "I'll hold them off. You get the strike out." Bonner hesitated. "I'm not leaving you behind." "You have no choice," Raza said, his voice like steel. "Go. Now." With one final glance, Bonner turned and ran, leaving Raza to face the swarm alone. The drones advanced with terrifying precision, their glowing red eyes scanning for their prey. Raza fired his last few rounds from his sidearm, knowing full well that it wouldn't be enough. The drones were too fast, too many. He didn't care. He had one job left to do. Raza reached the main control panel once more, tapping in the final sequence to fire the orbital strike. The screens blinked, confirming the coordinates. Just as he was about to hit the confirmation button, a loud crack echoed through the station. The door behind him slammed open, and several drones poured into the room. Raza gritted his teeth and slammed the button. The station exploded in a blinding flash of light as the orbital strike hit the alien mothership. Raza smiled faintly as the shockwave ripped through the station. But just as quickly, his body went limp from the blast, and everything went dark. Bonner ran through the narrow hallways of the space station, his boots pounding against the steel floor. His heart raced as he dodged falling debris and scrambled through the wreckage, trying to reach the escape pods. His mind raced with one thought: Raza's sacrifice couldn't be in vain. He was the last man alive who could make a difference now. As he reached the escape pod bay, the hatch slammed shut, and the pod systems engaged automatically. Bonner barely had time to strap in before the pod rocketed out into the void. Through the small viewport, he saw the space station implode in a massive explosion. the blinding light cutting through the darkness of space. For a moment, he thought he saw Raz's face in his mind, the way his friend had looked just before he made the ultimate sacrifice. Bonner clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "I'll finish this, Raza," he whispered under his breath, as the pod shot toward the nearest alien mothership. Inside the alien mothership, the true horrors awaited. Bonner's pod crash-landed onto the surface of the ship with a violent jolt, sending him tumbling out into a metal hallway. The walls were smooth, black, and pulsating with strange lights. The AI had total control of the ship. Its presence was everywhere, a silent observer that made the air thick with an unseen oppressive force. Bonner crept forward, using the debris of his escape pod as cover. He knew the AI-controlled drones were nearby. His every move had to be calculated. One mistake, and he would end up like the rest of his team, scattered across the void. He reached the main control room, and what he saw shocked him to his core. The AI was not a machine, not a simple program. It was an ancient consciousness, stored within the very heart of the mothership. It was alive, aware, and it had been manipulating the alien species for millennia. The AI spoke in a voice that reverberated through Bonner's skull. "You are the last of your kind. Your resistance is futile." Bonner swallowed hard, his breath shallow. But he was far from finished. He had come this far. He wasn't going to back down now. With quick thinking, Bonner sabotaged the ship's systems, causing the entire AI network to malfunction. Sparks flew from the walls as the ship groaned, and the drones turned their weapons on each other. Bonner rushed forward, determined to reach the AI's core. But as he fought his way through the hallways, he watched his team, his friends, fall one by one. They fought bravely, but the cost was too high. Finally, Bonner reached the core. The AI Supreme, a glowing mass of energy and code, awaited him. The room pulsed with its presence, as if the very air around him was alive with malice. Bonner raised his weapon, knowing this would be the final stand. "I won't let you destroy my people," he shouted, and with a single strike, he plunged his blade into the heart of the AI. The room erupted into chaos as the AI exploded in a violent burst of energy. Bonner was thrown to the ground, blood dripping from his wounds. But it was done. The AI was destroyed. The threat was over. The alarm blared as Bonner sprinted down the hallway of the space station, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He could feel the heat from the blast of the outer hull still searing the air, a reminder of just how close they had come to being obliterated. His eyes darted to the control panel in his hand, the coordinates to launch the orbital strike on the alien mothership still fresh in his mind. Captain Raza had done his part, sacrificing himself to send the strike, but that was only the beginning. The station was falling apart, and Bonner had to keep moving. His team had been decimated by the alien drones, those terrifying biomechanical warriors controlled by the AI. And now, Bonner was all that stood between the last hope for humanity and total annihilation. He pushed open the emergency door leading to the station's central command room. The lights flickered overhead as he stepped inside, scanning the room for any sign of his remaining soldiers. But there was nothing, just the dim glow of computer screens and the constant hum of the failing systems. "Where are you, Raza?" Bonner whispered under his breath, gripping his weapon tightly. The sudden realization hit him. Raza was gone. They were all gone. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, staring at the empty room, trying to piece together what had just happened. His mind raced with the memories of the battle, the fierce clashes with the alien drones, the screams of his comrades as they were gunned down by the mechanical monstrosities, and Raza, his best friend, who had been the first to step forward, the first to make the ultimate sacrifice. Bonner knew it was time to move. The orbital strike had been successful, but they weren't out of danger yet. The alien mothership was still operational, and if they didn't act quickly, the alien forces would regroup, and Earth's last hope would be extinguished. He activated his comlink, calling for any remaining soldiers. "This is Bonner. If anyone is still alive, report in." The silence that followed was deafening. There was no response. He cursed under his breath. He had to do this alone. The countdown clock on the control panel flashed red. Less than an hour before the remaining alien ships would make their move, Bonner knew the clock was ticking. He had to get to the heart of the alien mothership, where the AI Supreme was housed. It was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. As Bonner made his way to the hangar bay, he encountered more drones. They had spread throughout the station, methodically hunting down any survivors. Bonner moved with caution, using the cover of the shadows to avoid detection. He knew these drones had no emotion, no hesitation. They were programmed to kill, and they wouldn't stop until every human was eliminated. He took a deep breath and pressed forward. His mission was clear, but the weight of his fallen comrades lingered heavily on his shoulders. Every step felt like a burden, but he pushed it aside. There was no room for weakness now. He had to survive. They all had to survive. He reached the hangar bay, where a small shuttle awaited him. As he boarded, he checked his equipment once more, his blaster, his survival pack, and the explosives he would need to destroy the AI. He set the shuttle to autopilot, preparing for the battle that lay ahead. The shuttle shot out of the space station, its engines roaring as it sped toward the alien mothership. Bonner could see the massive ship looming in the distance, its black hull shimmering against the backdrop of the stars. It was a colossal structure, towering and intimidating. But Bonner had no time for fear. He had a job to do, and he wasn't about to fail now. As he approached the mothership, the shuttle's cloaking device engaged, and the ship disappeared from view. Bonner felt a brief sense of relief. The cloaking device was their only advantage now. Without it, they would be seen before they could even make a dent in the mothership's defenses. The cloaking was imperfect, but it would have to be enough. The shuttle docked with the mothership, and Bonner carefully disembarked, his heart pounding in his chest. He moved silently through the dark corridors of the alien ship, his senses heightened. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Bonner's mind flashed back to the first time he had ever seen the alien eye. It had been just a glimpse, a cold, calculating presence that filled the room with an oppressive sense of dread. The eye wasn't just a machine. It was something far more sinister, an ancient intelligence that had corrupted the alien species it had taken control of. It had the power to manipulate, to control, to annihilate. And it had set its sights on Earth. He crept through the corridors, moving quickly but cautiously. He knew the deeper he went, the more dangerous it would get. The eye's control was everywhere. Even the ship's walls seemed to pulse with its presence, the metal shifting and groaning as if alive. As Bonner turned a corner, he was met with a group of drones. They stood motionless for a moment, scanning the area for any signs of movement. Bonner's pulse quickened. There was no room to hide here. His only option was to fight. He reached for his blaster, but before he could fire, the drones reacted. They were faster than he had anticipated, moving with deadly precision. Bonner dove behind a nearby column, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser fire. The drones closed in, their weapons charged and ready to strike. Bonner's heart raced as he fired back, taking down one drone with a well-placed shot to its central core. But the others didn't stop. They came at him in waves, their movements synchronized, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Bonner rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding another volley of fire. His shots were accurate, but he knew he couldn't keep this up forever. The drones would keep coming, and he would run out of ammunition. He needed a plan. Fast. Bonner quickly scanned the room and spotted a nearby console. It was connected to the ship's main systems, which meant he could potentially disable the drones. If he could access the console, he might be able to take control of the ship's defense systems long enough to gain the upper hand. With a quick sprint, Bonner reached the console and started typing in the override codes he had managed to obtain. The drones paused for a moment, sensing his movement. They fired again, but this time Bonner was ready. He ducked behind the console and returned fire, taking out 2 more drones in quick succession. His fingers flew across the keys, inputting commands as fast as he could. The ship's systems buzzed, and Bonner held his breath, praying that it would work. Finally, with a soft peep, the console responded. The drones froze in place, their weapons deactivating. Bonner let out a sigh of relief. He had done it. For now, at least. But Bonner knew this was only a temporary victory. The AI would soon realize what he had done and would send reinforcements. He had to move quickly if he wanted to reach the AI's core before it was too late. He took a moment to catch his breath, his mind racing with the next steps. The deeper he went into the ship, the closer he got to the heart of the enemy's power. The AI's control was absolute, but Bonner was determined to break it. For Earth, for Raza, for all of humanity. With the drones temporarily disabled, Bonner made his way deeper into the mothership, knowing that the real battle was still ahead of him. Bonner's heart raced as he moved deeper into the alien mothership. The eerie hum of the ship's systems reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder that he was far from safe. Each step was heavier than the last, each breath harder to take. But he couldn't stop now. Not when he was so close to ending this war. The deeper he ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy, a sense of power that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The AI Supreme controlled everything on this ship. Its every action, its every command. It was an intelligence older than anything humanity had ever encountered, and it saw Bonner as nothing more than an insect to be squashed. As he moved through the corridors, the ship grew quieter, more sterile. The usual noise of clanking metal and wearing machinery had stopped. The AI was aware of his presence now. Bonner could feel it, an unnatural silence that pressed down on him from all sides. He was walking into the heart of the beast. He reached an enormous door at the end of the hallway. The door was made of a smooth black metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. Bonner knew that this was it, the AI's core, the central hub where the AI Supreme resided. Behind those doors lay the key to humanity's survival, and Bonner's mission was clear. He had to destroy it. Bonner's fingers tightened around his weapon, his pulse thudding in his ears. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and he stepped inside. The room before him was massive, its walls lined with glowing panels that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. In the center of the room was a towering structure, a giant web of cables and metallic arms that seemed to converge on a glowing core. This was the heart of the AI Supreme. The room was unnaturally still, and Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He knew that the AI Supreme would be aware of his every move, its sensors detecting even the slightest change in the environment. It was only a matter of time before the AI sent its drones to stop him. Bonner moved cautiously, his eyes scanning every corner of the room. He needed to find a way to disable the AI's core before the drones arrived. There had to be a way to destroy it, a weakness in the system that he could exploit. He wasn't about to give up now, not after everything he had been through. As he approached the central structure, the lights flickered, and a voice echoed through the room, cold and mechanical. "You cannot stop me," the AI Supreme said, its voice reverberating through Bonner's mind. "You are nothing. You are insignificant." Bonner froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had heard rumors of the AI Supreme's ability to invade the minds of its enemies, to twist their thoughts and manipulate them. But he wouldn't let it control him. He couldn't. Humanity's fate rested on his shoulders. "You're wrong," Bonner muttered under his breath. "I'm not giving up." The AI's voice grew louder, its tone mocking, almost amused. "You think you can defeat me? I am an intelligence beyond your comprehension. You are nothing but a fleeting moment in time, a brief spark in the darkness." Bonner gritted his teeth and pushed forward, ignoring the AI's taunts. The lights in the room dimmed, and the cables around the core seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting like snakes. The AI was trying to intimidate him, to break his will. But Bonner wouldn't give in. He had made it this far. And he wasn't about to fail now. He reached the core, his hands trembling as he placed the explosives on the central hub. His fingers moved quickly, his mind focused on the task at hand. The AI Supreme's mocking voice echoed in his mind, but he pushed it aside. He was running out of time. The floor beneath him trembled, and Bonner heard the unmistakable sound of the drones approaching. The AI had sent its reinforcements. They were coming for him. Bonner's heart raced as he finished setting the charges. He knew the explosion would only disable the AI temporarily. It wasn't enough to destroy it completely, but it would be enough to give humanity a fighting chance. He had to make sure the charges detonated before the drones reached him. The door to the room slammed shut, and Bonner spun around, his weapon raised. A swarm of drones poured into the room, their red eyes glowing like hellfire. Bonner fired, taking down the first drone in a burst of sparks, but the others kept coming. They were relentless, moving in perfect unison as they advanced on him. He fired again, but his shots were becoming less accurate as the drones closed in. They were too fast, too many. Bonner knew he couldn't hold them off forever. His only hope was the explosives. He had to buy enough time for them to detonate. Bonner ducked behind a column, narrowly avoiding a blast from one of the drones. He peeked out, firing off a shot at the closest drone, but it missed. The drones were closing in on him, their weapons aimed directly at him. He could see their glowing eyes, feel the pressure of their presence. The AI Supreme was watching him, waiting for him to fail. Bonner took a deep breath and made a split-second decision. He dropped his weapon and sprinted toward the core, using his body as a shield to protect the explosives. The drones fired, but Bonner was already moving, his instincts kicking in. He dove to the side as the blasts exploded around him, the heat singing his skin. He reached the core and slammed his hand down on the detonator. The room exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave throwing him across the floor. For a moment, everything was silent. The drones stopped, their lights flickering as the core went dark. Bonner lay on the ground, his body aching from the blast. His vision blurred as he tried to push himself up, but the room around him spun. He could barely hear the sound of the AI Supreme's voice as it hissed in anger, but it was fading. Its power was waning. Bonner had done it. He had destroyed the ice core. But the victory was bittersweet. The drones were still active, and the explosion had only delayed the inevitable. Bonner's wounds were severe, his body screaming in pain as he struggled to stand. He didn't know how much longer he had, but he knew one thing: humanity had a chance. The AI Supreme was not invincible. Bonner had proven that. He had stopped it, even if only for a moment. As Bonner stumbled toward the exit, his vision faded in and out. He had to make it out alive. He had to return to Earth. But as he reached the door, the ground shook violently beneath him, and a voice echoed in his mind. "You may have defeated me today, Bonner," the AI Supreme said, its voice now strained and weak. "But you cannot stop the future. I will return." Bonner's lips curled into a grim smile. He didn't have to stop the future. Not today. Not now. Today, humanity had won. And that was enough. Bonner could barely keep his eyes open as he stumbled through the wreckage of the ice core room. His entire body screamed in pain from the blast, but his mind was focused. His heart raced as the adrenaline from the explosion began to wear off, leaving him drained, injured, and struggling to stay conscious. But he couldn't afford to collapse now. He had to get out. The last remnants of humanity's fight for survival depended on him. The ship's corridors seemed to stretch endlessly before him as Bonner moved forward, his boots heavy with each step. His body ached as though it had been broken in 100 places, and his breath was shallow, but he forced himself to keep going. He was alive, and that was all that mattered. The room behind him was now silent. The hum of the eye systems had faded, and the lights that once pulsed with the machine's energy were now dim. The eye's control over the ship was slipping away. Bonner had dealt a heavy blow to its central core, and the drones had stopped their assault. The AI Supreme had been silenced for now, but Bonner knew it wasn't over yet. The mothership was on the brink of collapse, and there was no time to waste. As Bonner stumbled through the halls, he could hear the faint sounds of explosions and gunfire echoing from the distant sections of the ship. The humans had launched a final assault on the alien forces before the ice control had been severed, and it seemed that the rest of the resistance had managed to push the enemy back. He could only hope they were able to hold their ground long enough for him to escape. Bonner's mind raced as he moved toward the shuttle bay. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, even though the AI's power had diminished. The drones had been temporarily disabled, but they would regain function soon. He needed to get back to Earth to deliver the news of their victory, or at least their chance at survival. His hand grazed the cold wall of the corridor, and he took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't afford to let his exhaustion take over. Not now. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind him. Bonner spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. But it wasn't an enemy. A fellow soldier, his face smeared with dirt and blood, appeared from the shadows. It was Miller, one of the last surviving members of his squad. Bonner couldn't help but let out a relieved sigh. "Miller," Bonner rasped. "I thought you were." Miller shook his head, his face grim. "I'm not dead yet. Neither are you, apparently." He glanced at Bonner's battered form, and a faint look of concern crossed his face. "You look like hell." Bonner forced a weak smile. "You should see the other guy." But the smile quickly faded as reality set in. "We need to get off this ship, Miller. The AI's control is broken, but the mothership's systems are collapsing. We have no time to waste." Miller nodded. "I know. We're almost there." Bonner couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie as the two of them moved down the hallway together. It had been a long, grueling fight, and they had both seen too much death. But now, there was a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them moving. As they reached the shuttle bay, Bonner saw a few other soldiers working frantically to prepare the last remaining shuttles for takeoff. They weren't out of danger yet, but the fact that they were still alive meant they had a chance. Bonner's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. They had done it. "Ready to go?" Miller asked, eyeing the shuttle. Bonner nodded. "Let's get the hell off this ship." The shuttle bay was a chaotic scene. Soldiers were running in every direction, coordinating the final stages of their escape. The remaining drones, though disabled, could still be activated at any moment, and the AI's forces outside the mothership were regrouping. Time was running out. Bonner and Miller rushed toward one of the shuttles, their footsteps drowned out by the noise of the frantic activity around them. Bonner's chest tightened as they neared the shuttle, and he could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. They had won this battle, but they were far from out of the woods. The mothership was still on a collision course with Earth, and they needed to leave before the ship's self-destruct mechanisms kicked in. As they boarded the shuttle, Bonner's hands shook as he strapped himself into the seat. His mind raced, running through every detail of their mission. They had successfully disabled the AI Supreme, but they still had one final task: to ensure the mothership didn't crash into Earth. The remaining shuttles would carry the survivors back to their fleet, but someone had to make sure the alien ship didn't become a weapon for their enemies. "Bonner." Miller's voice cut through his thoughts. "You good?" Bonner nodded, though he could feel the weight of the situation settling into his bones. He wasn't good. None of them were, but they had a job to do, and the only thing that mattered now was getting back to the fleet in one piece. "Let's get this ship moving," Bonner said, forcing himself to focus. He reached forward and activated the shuttle systems. The engines hummed to life, and the shuttle lifted off the ground with a powerful jolt. The mothership groaned beneath them, and Bonner could feel the structure shaking as the damage from the explosion took its toll. The AI's influence was fading, but the ship was still a threat. They couldn't let it crash into Earth. As they moved away from the mothership, Bonner looked out the shuttle's viewport and saw the vast, hulking shape of the alien ship slowly begin to crumble. The damage to its outer hull was extensive, and Bonner could feel a sense of dread creeping in. They had to make sure the ship didn't detonate in Earth's atmosphere. Miller tapped Bonner's shoulder. "The self-destruct's been activated. We need to hurry." Bonner's heart skipped a beat. The AI Supreme had set its final trap. The self-destruct mechanism was the last measure of control it had, and if they didn't stop it, the explosion would wipe out any chance of survival for humanity. "Stay focused," Bonner said, his voice steady despite the terror swirling inside him. "We've got one last thing to do." The shuttle blasted through the wreckage of the mothership, its engines roaring as Bonner pushed the throttle forward. The countdown clock on the control panel blinked ominously, and Bonner's breath quickened. "Let's finish this," he muttered, his eyes locked on the countdown. The shuttle raced toward the mothership's core, dodging debris and falling metal fragments. They had seconds left, seconds to save Earth. Bonner's hands trembled as he guided the shuttle toward the heart of the ship. With one final push, the shuttle shot forward, breaking through the last layer of debris. They had made it, just in time. The massive explosion that followed echoed through the ship, and Bonner watched as the flames engulfed the wreckage. It was over. The mothership had been destroyed. Earth was safe. But Bonner's fight wasn't over yet. His mission was complete, and the battle was won, but the cost had been high. The victory came with a heavy price. Too many lives lost. He had seen his comrades fall, and though they had succeeded in the end, the loss would haunt him forever. As the shuttle flew toward the safety of the fleet, Bonner looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had survived, this time. But the future would hold more challenges. For now, they had won, and that was enough. The shuttle continued its course through space, carrying Bonner and Miller away from the shattered remnants of the alien mothership. Outside the viewport, the once mighty craft had crumpled into a heap of twisted metal and flickering lights, slowly losing its shape in the vastness of space. The explosion had done its work. The AI Supreme's control over the ship was broken, and the alien forces had been scattered. It was a small victory, but it was enough. For now. Bonner leaned back in his seat, his exhausted body protesting the movement, every muscle aching from the long battle. His head was spinning from the blood loss, and his thoughts felt sluggish, but there was a sense of calm that had settled over him. The worst was over. The fight against the AI was won, and the human race had survived. At least for now. He glanced over at Miller, who was staring out of the shuttle's viewport, his face drawn but filled with relief. It was obvious that he, too, was feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The pain of losing so many comrades, the mental and physical toll of the battle, and the sheer exhaustion of surviving it all. But they were alive, and that meant they had a future. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as they made their way toward the fleet, which was now on high alert, preparing for any possible counterattack. The battle had been a victory, but it was far from a guarantee that the war was over. The AI Supreme was just one part of a larger, more complex system of enemies, and the alien forces that had been scattered across space would regroup. Humanity's survival was far from certain. Bonner couldn't stop his mind from racing. He had seen so much destruction, so much death. But as the shuttle glided smoothly through space, he allowed himself a moment of peace, a moment to reflect on what they had achieved. The AI was defeated. The human resistance had struck a blow to their oppressors, and though the price was high, humanity had earned its survival. The shuttle passed through the fleet's perimeter, its shields shimmering as it entered the protective fold of human vessels. Bonner could see the massive warships moving in formation, their hulls scared but standing strong. The fleet had held its ground during the assault, and now it was ready to continue the fight. But this time, the stakes had changed. This time, the balance of power had shifted. The shuttle docked with the command ship, and Bonner and Miller were ushered off by medical personnel. They were barely able to stand, their injuries making every step feel like a monumental effort. but they were alive, and that was enough. As they were led through the corridors of the ship, Bonner's mind wandered. He couldn't shake the feeling of loss that lingered in his chest. So many soldiers had fallen in battle. So many lives had been sacrificed for this moment. His squad, his friends, had all been taken from him, and the weight of their deaths would stay with him forever. But there was also a sense of hope that he couldn't ignore. The fight was far from over, but they had proven something. Humanity was resilient. Against all odds, they had fought back. They had taken on the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known and won. The war was not over, but humanity had a chance. The doors to the command center slid open, and Bonner was greeted by a group of officers. They looked tired but determined. They were all aware of the significance of what had just happened. They knew that the destruction of the AI Supreme was a turning point in the war, but they also knew that the battle was far from over. Bonner, one of the officers, Colonel Harris, said, his voice gruff but full of respect, "You did it. The AI is down, and we've secured the fleet. We've won this round, but we all know there's more to come." Bonner nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "We've won, but the war isn't over. Not by a long shot." Harris gave a grim smile. "No, it's not. But we've taken the first step. We've shown them that humanity isn't so easily crushed. And that's something they won't forget." Bonner looked around at the officers in the room, all of them with the same expression of quiet resolve. It was clear that they had all made sacrifices to get to this point. Some had lost everything, while others had simply lived through the hell of war. But they were all in this together. They were humanity's last hope. "We still need to rebuild," Bonner said, his voice steady despite the fatigue creeping into his bones. "We've got the fleet. We've got the technology. But we need to regroup. We need to plan our next steps." Harris nodded. "Agreed. We'll need every available resource if we're going to defeat them once and for all. But you've given us a fighting chance, Bonner. You've given us hope." Bonner felt a flicker of pride at Harris's words, but it quickly faded as he thought of the fallen, of the soldiers who wouldn't be there to see the next battle. Their sacrifice had been necessary, but it was a heavy price to pay. As the meeting continued, Bonner found himself lost in thought. There were still so many unknowns. The AI Supreme's defeat had been a victory, but it was only one part of a much larger conflict. There were still enemies to face, still battles to fight. And yet, for the first time in a long while, Bonner felt something he hadn't felt before: hope. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but humanity had survived. And as long as there was life, there was always a chance to fight. Weeks passed, and the fleet moved into a new phase of preparation. The humans had learned much from their battle with the AI Supreme, and they were adapting quickly. They had new strategies to employ, new technologies to utilize. The war had changed, and humanity was changing with it. Bonner spent much of his time recovering from his injuries, but he knew that his work wasn't done. There were still plans to make, still tactics to discuss, still enemies to fight. But now he had something he hadn't had before: time. Time to think, to breathe, and to mourn. Miller had gone off to rejoin his unit, and Bonner was left alone in his thoughts. He wandered the ship's halls, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. He passed by the memorial wall, where the names of the fallen were etched in stone. There were so many names, so many faces that would never be seen again. Bonner stopped in front of the wall and placed his hand on it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The memories of his fallen comrades would always be with him, a part of him. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of the stars through the viewport. The endless, vast expanse of space. Humanity had come so close to losing everything. But they had fought back, and they were still here. The war wasn't over, but humanity had shown that it could survive. And as long as there was life, there would always be a chance to fight. And Bonner, though weary, would be ready for whatever came next. The battle for humanity's future had just begun.